What's in a mandate? Having failed to reach international consensus on Syria,
it's been a complete waste of time.
Washington prepares to act around the UN. For the time being, the administration firmly rules out any form of U.S. military intervention in Syria. But the Pentagon is busy laying out an attack strategy on Syria, just in case, should the president call for action. Experts say history shows the absence of international consensus would not be an obstacle to Washington if it decides to go ahead with intervention.
The United States sees the UN as a tool of convenience. If the UN is supple and going along with the United States, then the United States is fine to have a UN sanction for its actions. But when the UN and the people of the world or the countries of the world resist, then the United States says the UN is unwilling to do its job and then uses other instruments like NATO or other military arrangements. They did that in the case of Yugoslavia. They did that in the case of the Iraq War. Whenever the UN doesn't go along, the U.S. then says, well, to heck with the UN, we'll use some other instrument for the exercise of American power.
Last year, the UN Security Council authorized NATO to protect civilians in Libya, but the mission resulted in regime change.
The Libyan authorization of force was very specific, and it didn't authorize regime change, and the countries that partook in that operation, including the United States, far exceeded the UN mandate in that operation. I think that's symbolic of the fact that these UN mandates really aren't meaningful in the terms of international law. It's just the reality of it.
NATO countries have flooded Libyan rebels with weapons despite a UN arms embargo.
The U.S. government wants the UN, but they want the UN to do the U.S. bidding. The way the United States uses the United Nations in regard to the Israeli-Palestinian question is very emblematic. When the United Nations passed resolutions, which it has done repeatedly, demanding that the Israelis get out of the West Bank and earlier Gaza and earlier the Sinai, the United States didn't enforce those resolutions. They didn't demand that they be enforced. When it came to the United Nations saying the Palestinians have a right to be a recognized state, the United States acted as if there was a crime against humanity that the United Nations dared take up the issue of Palestinian rights. We can see here a manipulation of the United Nations. When it does what the United States wants, fine, but when it stands with the Palestinian people, which it has repeatedly over and over again, then the United States government, Republican or Democrat, found a way to condemn the United Nations.
The U.S. also did not support the resolution on Syria put forward by Russia, which would call for all sides in the conflict to stop the violence and to start a dialogue. Instead, it chose to take sides in a civil war. One might describe the U.S. attitude towards the UN as use it if needed, go around it if you don't like it. But while an a la carte approach to the world body might suit Washington, it makes for a bad recipe for world stability. I'm Ganesh Chekan reporting from Washington, RT.